There are some names that are just synonymous with power. A dynasty that didn't just accumulate wealth, but used it as a lever to shape the course of entire nations. Today, we're examining the mechanics of the Rothschild Empire. Okay, picture this. It's 1875. The British Empire is at the absolute zenith of its power, but it's facing a major strategic crisis. The Suez Canal, the brand new artery of global trade, well, a controlling stake was suddenly up for grabs. The price was £4 million, a sum so vast that even the British government couldn't raise it on short notice. So with no time to consult Parliament, Prime Minister Benjamin Disraeli does something unheard of. He completely bypasses the Bank of England and turns to a private banking house. He secures the entire £4 million loan from a single source, M.M. Rothschild and Sons. And with that one transaction, Britain purchased its controlling stake, securing its economic lifeline to the east. And that right there, that single transaction gets to the very heart of our story. We're talking about immense geopolitical leverage, all held by one family. You see, they weren't just bankers. They were kingmakers, the financiers of empire. So the question is, what was the mechanism? How did a family from the Jewish ghetto of 18th century Frankfurt build enough geopolitical leverage to broker the fate of empires? Well, the answer lies in a business model that was absolutely revolutionary. The architect of all this was the patriarch, Mayor Amschel Rothschild. He understood that in a fragmented Europe, power wasn't just about capital, it was about controlling the flow of information. And his strategy was ruthlessly effective. Instead of centralizing, Mayor Amschel sent his 5 sons out to the financial nerve centers of Europe. Amschel in Frankfurt, Nathan in London, James in Paris, Karl in Naples, and Solomon in Vienna. But you have to understand, this wasn't just a chain of banks. No, this was a coordinated, private, continent-spanning intelligence network. The system they built was a masterclass in efficiency. First, you decentralize across the key capitals. Second, you establish a private courier network, one that's faster and more reliable than any government's. Third, you use that network to achieve information supremacy. And the final step, you exploit that information gap for massive financial gain before anyone else even knows what's happening.
The Napoleonic Wars became the ultimate crucible for this system. All that constant conflict created volatile markets and a desperate need for sovereign debt, which was the perfect environment for the Rothschilds to deploy their financial and informational advantages.
Their strategy was one of calculated agnosticism. The Rothschilds provided massive loans to Britain to fund its war effort, while simultaneously bankrolling Napoleon's campaigns. By financing both sides, they profited no matter what the military outcome was, and they secured unparalleled access to the highest levels of power all across the continent. At the very heart of their success was the exploitation of what economists call asymmetric information. In an age before the telegraph, knowing something hours or even days before the rest of the market, well, that wasn't just an advantage. It was a license to print money. And the most legendary example of this came at the Battle of Waterloo. On June 18th, Napoleon was defeated. By the very next morning, a Rothschild courier had already reached Nathan Rothschild in London. While the rest of the city waited anxiously for news, Nathan, armed with exclusive knowledge of the British victory, made his move on the London Exchange. When the official government report finally arrived, over 24 hours later, the market soared, and the Rothschilds had already secured an immense fortune. Today, we'd call it insider trading. After the Napoleonic Wars, the era of constant European conflict started to fade. So, the family pivoted. They took the vast capital they had accumulated from financing wars and redirected it into financing the Industrial Revolution, building the very infrastructure of the modern world. Their investments were sweeping and strategic. They poured money into railways, knitting the continent together with a new network of transport and trade. They dominated mining, gaining a controlling stake in the global diamond market, and they diversified into luxury goods, acquiring iconic French vineyards. The scale of their industrial influence was unprecedented. They bankrolled foundational parts of the British and French railway systems. They became the largest investors in the De Beers diamond monopoly and acquired legendary wine estates like Chateau Lafite. Their financial expertise was so trusted, they were hired to manage Britain's royal mint, and their reach was global. They even financed Brazil's peaceful independence from Portugal in exchange for favorable trade rights. Now, such immense wealth and secretive power inevitably breeds suspicion and myth. For over 2 centuries, the Rothschild name has been at the center of countless conspiracy theories. So let's take a moment and separate the documented reality from the enduring fiction. The conspiracy theory posits a secret cabal controlling trillions in hidden global wealth. The reality is more complex. The dynasty's fortune is now dispersed across many descendants and diversified assets. The publicly known entity, Rothschild & Co., manages over 100 billion euros, a significant sum, to be sure, but a fraction of the mythical trillions. But this story isn't just about profit. As their power grew, the family developed what they saw as a social conscience, using their financial leverage to shape society in ways that went far beyond the balance sheet. They used their capital for political and social ends. They financed the British Relief Association during the Great Famine in Ireland and aided Scottish emigrants displaced by the Highland clearances. Critically, they provided the massive loan that enabled the British government to compensate slave owners, which was a necessary financial step for the abolition of slavery in the empire. They also funded early Zionist settlements and used their financial power to oppose rising anti-Semitism in Russia. So when you look at it, the Rothschild legacy is this complex tapestry. It's woven from geopolitical finance, pioneering industrial development, the weaponization of information, and strategic philanthropy. And all of it is shrouded in a myth that often overshadows the documented facts. This leads us to a final, critical question. When you consider their influence over the Suez Canal, the abolition of slavery, and the very infrastructure of modern industry, they were clearly more than just passive financiers. The question isn't simply how much money they made, but to what extent the modern world was built, for better or for worse, on a Rothschild blueprint.